This episode was on May 23rd. Welcome to the Polytopian Interviewer, where I interview people on their experiences and views on the Polytopia Discord community. I have Bakalol with me. How are you?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you've been on Polyjams like 2 or 3 times already?
Yeah, I think I was interviewed twice, but only via text so far.
Mm-hmm. And I also take it, based on your profile pic, you play or played Clash Royale quite a bit?
Actually, yeah, before I started studying, so that was until 5 years ago, I was playing Clash Royale quite a bit, and I was also quite competitive there. I have a tendency to just always, whenever I play something, to try to be as good as I can, and maybe it's a bit excessive at times, but I'm just having fun being good at games.
As long as you're having fun.
Yeah, I'm usually having fun, but trying to always win can also be frustrating at times because there's always people that are better than you at any given game.
Mm-hmm.
You're bound to lose eventually, even if you think you're the best.
So I take it for Polytopia, you started with bots, decided they were too easy, and then found the Polytopia Discord?
I was on vacation with my family, and my brother was on his phone. He's also on Polyjams. From his phone, I heard the Polytopia theme playing. I was like, no way, you're also playing Polytopia. At that time, I didn't play Polytopia as much or like at all, but I kind of remembered it because I played it a few weeks prior. He was like, yeah, you too, and we started with pass and play because we were too cheap to even buy a tribe. Then we bought our first tribes and we were like, oh, Dengia seems OP because they have swordsmen right out of the gate. Or Illyrion and Aquarium seem really strong because they have these special units, and we played against each other because there wasn't really a way to play with other people online. I was looking for Reddit. Maybe there was something about it. I looked for the Reddit link a bit, and from there I found the Discord link, and on the Discord link I played, I think it was Naluk back then, the mastermind behind the Poly-Elo bot. He invited me to Polyjams, and that's kind of how I got to the server for the first time, and I enjoyed my time quite a lot so far.
You've been in the Polytopia Discord for about 2.5 years now. Most people stick around for maybe 6 months. Why do you still stick around?
I think it has largely to do with the community. Playing the game as a team is much more interesting to me long term than playing it by yourself because you can just bounce ideas off each other, and it also feels a lot more balanced than having a player go first, move first, do everything first, or basically be a whole turn ahead. Also just being able to communicate and have fun. It turns this game into a team experience, which is very fun to me. I feel like playing online games always lives from playing it as a team or playing it together. I think this being part of a team makes it a lot of fun, and also being a team leader or a mod where you naturally have to engage with the community a lot more than just being, let's say, a random player on a team. Then you get to know every person a bit more, and it also just feels a lot cooler when you have a team and you know every single person on your team. I think that's also part of why I was so motivated these past years.
Okay. How did you join the Lightning and Polyjams?
Actually, I joined Ronin initially because Nalok, who was the leader of Ronin at the time, just invited me, and back then there weren't really any rules on who gets to join what team. I think at some point after season 3, the leader of Lightning went inactive, and Lightning basically didn't have any people at all. I was approached and I was asked, hey, there's this team that's basically dead. Do you want to take it over? And I was like, yeah, sure. As long as my brother can also join, and a friend of mine is inactive by now, but as long as my brother can join, I would take over Lightning. So that was for the start of season 4. There were quite some players that are actually really good, but at the time, just they didn't really have any idea what they were doing on Polyjams. So I approached every one of them, like Pinail Pate, who is a really strong player, and I approached him, was like, hey, are you interested in team games? And he was like, actually, I prefer round robin games, fighting everybody. But I convinced him to try it out at least, and he had a lot of fun, and he became also one of the best players in the past seasons, I think.
I take it you mainly focus on your pro games rather than the team role? For example, you're a recruiter?
Yeah, I mean, I used to do everything for the team. I used to be the only person recruiting, the only person doing the lineups. I was checking in on every game, but then my studies started taking up more time, so I started delegating obligations to other members of my team. Currently, mostly just playing and not really doing any leader stuff or recruiting sort of stuff because I'm just a lot more busy now than I used to be when I initially took over Team Lightning. It would be very hard for me to take on these responsibilities now and play and think about my turns as well.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any tips for 1v2 games?
Not really. 1v2 games are kind of similar to 1v1 games, just harder, because most of the time you meet one player early and the other a bit later, so you have to finish the first opponent you meet. You have to finish them off really quickly and just throw all your units at them at once, and then try not to die with the second person in the meantime when you meet them later. But I think just stacking all your units at one area and basically having a cannonball of death roll across the map, kill and destroy everything else, is probably the most effective strategy. In order to do that, you obviously have to be at least stronger individually than any of the other players, so if one of the two players has a stronger start than you, then you're probably going to lose because they are already stronger, would be stronger in a 1v1, and they have an additional small support from the third player, then that's really bad. In general, it just comes down to play really well and be aggressive.
Mm-hmm. That's what I figured out in my limited experience.
Yeah.
For the game in general, would you say that practice is what got you so good at the game?
Yeah, definitely. I already told you that I am very competitive, so I have a tendency to figure out stuff by myself really quickly. But also playing a lot with strong players helped me out quite a bit. If you haven't been around so long, then you might not have followed my journey to beat Courage once. He was, at the time, completely undefeated. I was like, hey, I'm going to challenge you, and he just completely stomped me once, twice. I think he beat me 8 times in a row until I once had like a strong spawn and beat him, but that was quite a learning experience. And he also, the first person I saw who shared these puzzles on like what's the mathematically best play to overcome the situation or to get 3 giants and an income of 16 stars per turn by the end of turn 5 or whatever. These kind of puzzles also get me into thinking that, hey, Polytopia isn't just look what feels good, but also you can calculate quite a bit on how to optimize your moves. And in doing so, if you just do the mathematically best play all the time, then you're already really strong. Your decisions on a bigger scale just have to be good, but making the best move with the information you're given is quite possible most of the time, and the much harder part is based on experience and based on guesswork to do the best thing, like the possible best thing. I don't know how to explain it. When you're lacking the information and you have to figure out the best thing to do with these gaps of information. And I guess that's where a lot of experience comes in. Yeah, if you played a few hundred games of Polytopia, then you're gonna know better what your opponents can or cannot do, as opposed to playing your first or second multiplayer game.
For sure. Not only are you good at the traditional game format, you also excel in Wicked Bender. How did you get good at that?
Wicked Bender is very interesting because they have these rule sets that counter just stomping your opponent really quickly with these defensive giant rules that you cannot cross into your opponent's territory. There's a few options. The first one, which is maybe the easiest, but also very rare option, is to just overwhelm your opponent with riders early on. But the alternative is to just math it out again really well and try to find the good, perfect combination between not dying on the defense or having a solid offense and buying enough techs, etc. to reach these 10k points. In a sense, it's because the map is so small and because you have a different goal, and it's not just who has the strongest army, but more like who finds the best way to play in the situation, under consideration of more factors actually, because there's different ways you can win the game. It's actually a lot harder, I would say, but also because you can just win by buying text, for example. You can math it out quite well to look at your opponent's cities, how many has he, how many stars does he make per turn, like how much does he roughly need to buy all the text for him to reach 10k points, how long would I need, etc. It's very math intensive if you play that way, but it can also be a lot of fun. Back then, I think also people weren't as good as they are now. I think if I came back to Wicked Banner now, I wouldn't be as successful. It's also just playing the game with some certain aspects changed, but playing the game nonetheless. So if you're good at regular Polytopia, you're probably also going to be good at Wicked Bender if you understand the rules.
Do you have any plans to conquer Polymasters and Polyladder and work your way up there?
I started playing Polymasters. I used to play Polymasters some time ago, but at some point I lost interest with all these 1v1 tournaments and Facebook League and etc. because, as I said before, playing 1v1s aren't as interesting to me as playing team games, so I tried to focus mostly on my team games. I don't think I will be joining any 1v1 servers soon, with the exception, of course, being Poly live, because I like playing games live and just having this very limited amount of time to make your moves. Because if you want to play a 1v1 game perfectly, then you have to do so much math and all by yourself, and it's not so much fun to me anymore. If you're busy in real life as well, then I would like to stick to team games and these live games where you're like, okay, I have to play for 30 minutes now, and then afterwards I'm done for the week with Poly Live, and I don't have to worry about timing out or making suboptimal moves.
You have a lot of similarities to me. I tend to like 1v1s and not a lot of math. Live is interesting, but of course that requires a time commitment, and there's trade-offs for everything.
Yeah.
Do you
and
have
I'm already timing out enough in the recent past in my team games, so I shouldn't also take on I shouldn't take on more 1v1s on top of it.
Yeah, you're supposed to be one of those greatest players. Don't time out. Ah!
I used to not time out at all. I was one of these people that would always play super fast. But I started working a few weeks ago, so as it turns out, work is actually taking up a lot of time. Who would have thought? And then after work, maybe I'm not in the mood to play because I'm already kind of drained. It's not the same as being a student with zero responsibilities.
Do you have a favorite tribe?
Yeah, I would say it's Polaris, most likely. I like in general most tribes, but these basic tribes, I feel like they're all sort of similar. I know they have differences in playstyle, but I really like these special tribes and how they change the regular formula of the game. While I feel like Illyrion and Aquarion aren't so interesting, because Aquarion it has so little resources that sometimes it's just unfun to play because you die before you get anything going. Illyrion can feel similar. I mean, I would guess now it's better since chopping has been moved to the free spirit part. It used to be really frustrating when you couldn't chop, so your opponents would be just a lot faster with their economy. Polaris feels really good to me. I like that they have these downsides of techniques like being limited to Moonies and Gamis, so if you don't have your super units ready, you're gonna have really weak units that you still need in order to advance, but at the same time have units that can use the ice really well, like the sleds, and that's just very fun to me. I would imagine that I would like Simanti as much too if I played them more, but I didn't get to play them as much so far, so I can't say so much about them, but from the limited experience I had with them, they're also really fun. Polaris and Simanti are probably my top two tribes in terms of what I like.
Makes sense, because as you mentioned before, you mainly play in PC, and now since Simanti is a tier on its own, most people are not going to be able to play them.
Yeah, that's kind of a bummer, but that's the trade-off you have to make if you want people to be able to play every tribe, and if you don't give them either like this point system that is like the rule set, then people will never play any of the tribes at the bottom, like Aquarion, Xing, Umaji, etc. So while I would love to play Simanti a bit more often. I would hate to see only games where people pick Simanti, Luxidor, and Badur or whatever, because that also does get stale eventually.
Mm-hmm.
At least from my point of view, I prefer having more diverse games and giving people more options on what they can play and what they can combine, and maybe even get some synergies of a terrain or tech trades, etc.
Least favorite tribe?
It depends kind of on the game mode and on the map type, but generally speaking, it would probably be Umaji or Aimo. I know that a lot of people love Aimo, but to me they always seem like just a generally subpar tribe, with the exception of having one random monument you can place at turn 5, which can be nice, but they don't really have anything going for them. With Umaji, I just don't like that you get a rider at the start, that's nice, but if you go for a second rider, then you're bound to just completely ruin your economy because you capture villages faster than you can buy techs. So you're always going to have a lot of level 1 villages, which is very frustrating to play. And if you just get a warrior on a unit on turn 1 or turn 0, then you're just playing basically a regular tribe with a rider instead of a warrior. That's also not super cool to me. And I feel like all the other tribes have at least something going on for them, like Zengi being able to get big forges, or same with Xingxi, or Quetzali just being the tribe that sends a defender in first and then maybe gets with a good sawmill and gets a giant going early. I feel like Umaji and Aimo both lack these abilities or aspects.
Makes sense. Is your favorite unit the Rider then?
Yeah, Riders are a really fun unit. I think they bring the most strategic aspects into the game with the retreat ability. Also, the interactions with roads are a lot of fun. Probably in a strategic sense, they're the most interesting unit for sure, and that also makes them the most fun, as opposed to swordsmen who just run towards you, they punch you, and then either you die or they die at some point. Riders being able to retreat and heal or attack again, or you can sacrifice them. You also have to plan a bit around on where they retreat, how they move, how they block maybe the opponent's movement. That gives riders a lot of multiple purposes, which makes them very cool and interesting. You're right, probably riders would be my favorite unit. They can't retreat on land, so riders are probably more fun.
Would you say you have a favorite strategy at all?
Being a person that learned a lot from Courage, I would say I love getting a giant early by turn 4 or turn 5, but by now that's not something that is guaranteed. It used to be way easier with Badur being so overpowered and chopping being in the forestry tree. You could get these turn 5 giants very consistently, but nowadays I like just getting tier 1 techs to level up my first and second city to level 2 maybe. I don't really have a set strategy. I still like getting giants early, but otherwise, riding and roads is probably always a solid strategy that I like, that also gives me fun gameplay, as opposed to sending a giant towards your opponent's capital and just hoping you can kill them and they cannot really defend.
What's the most memorable game you ever played?
Quite a few come to my mind. The Season 5 finale against the Plague was really nice, but the games weren't super spectacular by themselves. It was just because it was my one and only season win I had so far. But the more interesting games were probably against the Crawfish in the Season 7 semifinals. We lost them, but it was so much fun because Ben and I were playing against, I think, Skrielda and the show, and all of us were so intensively writing down their points. They were doing it for us. They were counting our stars. We were counting theirs. We were planning everything out. They were doing the same, and it was really close until, I think, turn 15, 16, at which they got an edge on us and we lost. But it was so much fun. I had similar games this season versus Sparkies. I played both games against them, and they were both very intense and very fun. So these games would probably come to my mind just because they were so close and you could feel that your opponents were playing really well, and it made it just very engaging and made it and to even plan out the later moves, which for me sometimes is very dreadful because you know you're winning, so why would you take 20 to 30 minutes to map out your moves if you know that you're gonna win no matter what? So tend to lose interest in these games. I really like it when it's close, even if I'm losing.
Okay. I take it your favorite part of the Discord is communicating with people in your team games?
Yeah, that's probably on the top for me. I also like randomly joining chatting channels and just banter or trash talk a little bit, but I'm not doing that so much simply due to time restrictions and with the game chats. I just like exploring ideas with my teammates.
That's all the questions I had.
Okay.
Thanks so much for letting me interview you.
Thank you for having me.
Maybe I'll have the honors of going against you, but probably not anytime soon.
Yeah, we'll see. Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
As always, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed it, feel free to share it. For the text version, you can join my Discord in the description. I also have a YouTube channel where I play 1v1s and occasionally do tutorials. We'll be back next week. Bye!